So I'm going to call the Executive Body Board to order for Tuesday, March 28th. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 22, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, public bodies otherwise governed by the open meeting law are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by joining Zoom meeting number 854-0032-4335 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at ATM@Ayer.MA.US or 978-772-8220 extension 100 prior to the meeting. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So first order of business is review and approval of previous meeting minutes from March 7th. I did review them, had no issues.
I had no issues.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All right, excellent. Roll call the vote. Ms. Antonellis?
Aye.
Ms. Tierney?
Aye.
Mr. Friskowski?
Aye.
Mr. Pompriant?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. It's unanimous. All right. Item 3 on the agenda is our fiscal year 2024 budget update.
Mr. Chair, good afternoon. As the committee, my board is aware, the select board and the finance committee will be meeting on April 4th for the finalization of the budget and the warrant in preparation for town meeting. And I know that the finance committee is meeting tomorrow to review the warrant articles with financial impact. So I just want to point out a couple points since we last met. So we sent to the select board and the FinCom and posted to the budget page on March 23rd what we're calling the final draft of the budget. I want to thank Barbara for her efforts with that. And on the final draft, it's highlighted in green, the changes. We were able to get the budget increase over FY23 below $1 million. The increase right now is $942,459, or about a 5.56% increase over last year. When you factor in the health insurance, energy and inflation and so forth, we're pretty, it's fairly accurate. I mean, obviously our goal is, to minimize the increases. What changed from draft 3 to the final, just briefly, and this is highlighted in green, and the management support line, we're able to reduce $30,000 through a thorough review of all of those account lines there. The general insurance numbers did come in since draft 3. A special thanks to Ms. Antonellis for handling those. And there was about a $19,000 savings there based on the placeholders we had projected. On the fire department, Ms. Antonellis and I met with the fire chief and the deputy chief, and upon a detailed analysis, was able to reduce the overtime requested in the fire department by $20,000 and about another $7,300 in reductions that would not impact service delivery. On the veterans, Mike Detillion, the Veterans Commissioner, Barbara had met with him, and I had discussed with him the number of veterans that we're currently servicing, and that budget is largely driven by the census of veterans, is down, and the projection is somewhat down. So there was an opportunity for about a $25,000 reduction there. And then throughout the budget, probably about another $5,000 in reductions. So those were the major changes in the area of the budget. We'll be using that final draft for the discussion on April 4th.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the budget? No? All right. Thank you very much. Item number 4 is review of the financial warrant articles for the 2023 annual town meeting.
So, Mr. Chair, I was going to pull up, so per the select board, the draft warrant was provided last Friday to the select board and the FinCom and posted, and I've got the shared screen up here. Again, as I mentioned, the FinCom will be reviewing tomorrow, and of course the select board and FinCom on the 4th, doing a thorough review. So I was just briefly, through you, Mr. Chair, just going to highlight some of the financial matters with respect to the warrant, and then through you if there are any questions. So the first thing, just want to point out, there is the need for a special town meeting right before the annual town meeting for some supplemental appropriations. From time to time, the town has had these. The reason it happens right before the annual town meeting is upon approval from town meeting, these funds are available, and these funds are also supplemental funds needed for 2023 that we're in. So Carly, if you could just scroll down, there's 3 articles. There's a supplemental appropriation for water of $146,000, and Article 2, a supplemental appropriation for sewer for $159,000. And the DPW director and water and sewer superintendent presented to the board about a month ago, the select board, the justification or the request for these supplemental appropriations. And as the explanatory notes say, it's being driven on the water side and sewer side, increased costs in chemicals, some unforeseen repairs and well maintenance. And it's been a tough, tight year on both of these. But given the overall situation, nothing to raise a specter of concern on those 2. On Article 3, the Ambulance Enterprise Fund, the chief and Barbara and I had met looking for a $20,000 supplemental appropriation. Again, if you scroll down a little bit more on the explanatory note, it's really, with the factors driving this, have been some unforeseen cost increases, which has sort of been the theme of FY 2024, and unforeseen increase in the call volume. Sometimes in the past on the ambulance enterprise, again, if this is authorized by town meeting, the supplemental appropriation, if it's up to the $20,000, if the full amount isn't needed, obviously it isn't used. But looking at to get to July 1, it looks like this supplemental appropriation is in order. So those are the 3 articles on the special town meeting warrant. Then you get to the annual town meeting warrant. And as I mentioned last night, there are 30 articles. Of the 30, most of them will be familiar to attendees and voters at town meeting, and the standard business articles of the town. Article 1, salaries of elected officials, pretty straightforward. Article 2 is the contract funding for the Ayer Town Hall Clerical Union. As the note says, I'll make a brief presentation at town meeting on basically the cost impacts of the contract, and we will be getting the contract MOA up on the town's website shortly. Article 3 is the omnibus budget, and we'll talk about later at this meeting. Obviously, after the article is moved and seconded, we generally have a presentation at town meeting. We're also going to talk about today the budget book, which we'll also have, and the omnibus will be printed in the insert of the warrant. Moving down, Articles 4 and 5 are the 2 school assessments, Ayer Shirley Regional and Neshoba Valley Tech. Then Articles 6 through 9 are the enterprise fund articles, solid waste, ambulance, water, and sewer. And the budget book, as the note says, will have the specific budgetary information on those.
Okay, Robert, if I can interrupt briefly, Dennis does have a question, I believe, if that's okay. Dennis?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks. So, and this came up last year regarding the school. I think it would be helpful. I think it would be helpful for the citizens of the town, and in fact for the school system, if we could have someone from the school. I know that Neshoba Valley did it last year, but there was no one from Ayer Shirley there. And again, to kind of speak to, and again, the woman from Neshoba Valley, I believe, was the superintendent. She presented a student who had done great things, and some kind of program that had been initiated. I think it would be helpful for the school to kind of come to the meeting, and perhaps it's the moderator's job to invite them, but to thank the town for their, support of the school system, to talk about some of the things that the school system has done over the last year that warrants the funding, their hope for close cooperation. I just think it's a nice gesture. And, Neshoba Valley Tech did it last year, and it was relatively warmly received. So, I would just kind of ask, perhaps I should direct my question directly to the school committee. But it seems
Dennis, Dennis. So Dr. Renda was there last year at the town meeting. I think last year's town meeting got off to a late start, and then on the essence of time, he did not give his presentation.
I see.
So every town meeting, the regional school districts do send a representative. Dr. Pigeon does come from Neshoba Valley, and then usually it'll be Dr. Renda, the superintendent from Ayer Shirley Regional, and plus there's also representatives from the Ayer Shirley Regional School Committee always attend town meeting, and our representative on the Neshoba Valley School Committee attends town meeting also.
So will Dr. Renda be kind of thanking the town or making a presentation or kind of initiating the request?
They usually do come prepared with a presentation.
Okay. No, I think it's pretty important that relationship between the town supporting the school district be maintained and strengthened.
No, I agree. Right. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah.
All right, back to you, Robert. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So we had just finished on the enterprise articles, numbers 6 through 9, and the details will be in the budget book. So with Article 10, the capital requests, these are the requests that we're looking to borrow for. These are what were recommended by the Capital Planning Committee to the Select Board, and per the policy, generally anything over $50,000 we have historically borrowed for. So these are the borrow items. I want to point out just a couple things. One, all of the information related to these requests in the capital process is on the budget page. Number two, all departments that do have requests will be prepared to answer any questions, and we'll have brief slides through the moderator to clarify any points. And this article does require a 2/3 majority vote, as it is a borrow article. Then Articles 11 and 12 are the two debt exclusion articles. Article 11 is the debt exclusion for the fire ladder truck. Again, both of these articles require a 2/3 majority vote, so a higher threshold. We also, as I pointed out, the debt exclusion is a two-part process. The articles have to pass town meeting, and the articles have to pass the ballot at the local election on May 9th. Both the fire chief for Article 11 and the DPW director for Article 12 will have presentations prepared for town meeting. I do want to point out, I just haven't had a chance to change it for last night's meeting. Under Article 12, the good news is it's now no longer $5 million. The DPW director with Mass DOT did get the small bridge grant reprogrammed. So this will change to $3 million at this point. We just haven't, just from last night. Article 13, these are the capital requests from the Capital Planning Committee. These are the items that are generally below $50,000. There's two exceptions this year that we pay for directly out of capital stabilization. We do that to reduce the borrowing, and it's been a practice in the past to pay outright. Again, these will require all departments are prepared to explain and make brief presentation, and the information on the request is on the budget page. And you just scroll down a little, and these require 2/3 vote as well, a little higher, as it's transferring funds from capital stabilization to pay for these items. Article 14 is the town's post-employment benefits fund article. We've historically been putting $300,000 towards our obligations from the OPEB Board of Trustees. This article, per policy, we're using $154,364 from the local meals tax, and then the balance from free cash, as we have done in the past, to fund this requirement. Article 15 is a replenishment of the Ayer Library Trust funds. As previously mentioned, there was an emergency repair of the Ayer Library heating system last August, significant repair that needed to happen also due to timing and supply chain issues to make sure that the library had heat from the fall. The trustees used $35,000 from trust funds in order to move this forward, and we're recommending to replenish those trust funds through this article. There are two raise and appropriate articles, Article 16 and 17. These are articles where the funds do impact the tax rate in the fall. The first is the general fund borrowing, $81,600. So this is those previous article for the borrowing, the first year costs. Article 17 is the funding for the aquatic weed control for the town's ponds. The Conservation Commission will have representatives at the town meeting and will be prepared to answer any questions with respect to that. Then Article 18, this funds, we're looking to put $10,000 into the reserve fund for future payments of accrued liabilities for absences. Town meeting created this back in 2020. This fund is used to fund any separations from service or retirements from the town. There's currently about $60,000 in that fund. The target benchmark is usually around $75,000. We're looking to put about $10,000 in there for this year. The forward funding of the town's pension assessment at $300,000 from free cash. We have done this the last several cycles and have realized considerable savings on the annual pension assessment. In fact, this year, the pension assessment increase was only about 1.6%. If we had not forward funded the pension assessment, it would have been more of just over 6%. And be prepared, at town meeting to explain and to show those savings. Article 20. Yep.
Robert, sorry. Dennis, you have a question?
On the reserve fund for the upon ending their employment, it's the their future payments of accrued. And
you're
frozen.
As part of the pay package or the compensation, so that there isn't a separate fund. If somebody's going to be paid out 20% of their sick time, as their salary reflects, or as each annual budget comes up, that be included there, as opposed to having a separate fund, which they then access for accrued vacation, accrued sick time, or, whatever it happens to be. Is there some?
Yeah, so the way that the budgeting works, and this is something that we struggled with years and years ago, where you create the budget based upon what your expenses are for the fiscal year. And in that, for a single employee, it only includes the PTO and the vacation that they're allocated for that specific year. However, if they don't use it, it then goes into a backlog, but that we do not actually budget for. So this reserve is to create a fund that we can draw from, because what we were running into is employees would leave, whether it's be retirement or there's just a separation, and they would be owed, say, just to throw out a number, depending on how long they're with us, so it could be owed upwards to like $10,000 to $15,000 in back sick pay or vacation time. And the operating budget isn't designed to absorb that much. So it was either we would have to either over budget every single year to allocate for that. But this reserve fund gives us the ability to kind of have a more granular level view of our operating expenses on an annual basis, while also being able to afford those additional expenses in the time that we have a separation from an employee.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that.
Welcome. Sorry, Robert. Thank you.
No, sorry. Thank you. That's it. Okay. So we talked about the forward funding of the pension. Article 20. So the UDAG, fund is under the select board to be used for infrastructure and economic development projects. However, it is unrestricted, and from time to time, there have been things that have been authorized by the select board that have not had a replenishment mechanism. And so what we've done is, when we can, is replenish the UDAG to keep it whole. So this Article 20 looks to use $60,185 from free cash to replenish three previous items that UDAG funds were used for: the Senior Center feasibility study, Park Street infrastructure design study, and the fire foam PFAS removal. This was the current fire foam that was in the fire apparatus at the station was the old foam that had PFAS in it, and wanted to get that removed. Article 21, a new proposal from this year from Barbara, is to pay down of the balance of a maturing bond anticipation note, looking to transfer $322,565 from free cash, paying down this band. In doing that, in addition to paying the band down, Barbara has calculated would realize an estimated future savings of about $89,128 by the year 2036 over the length of the band payoff. So Article 22 is the stabilization fund article.
Robert, excuse me, there's a question from the iPhone on the previous article.
Thank you, Carly. It just popped up.
Yep. Thank you. It's Pauline. I'm so sorry my name isn't on my iPhone like it is on my iPad. I have a question about free cash.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Please.
the budget. I'm sorry?
Please go ahead.
I think the budget public hearing was the 24th. I know it was like last week. And I suggested at that meeting two things. I don't know where the second one landed yet. I haven't had a chance to look. But one was using a small amount of free cash to replenish the funds that were removed or spent from the 4th of July revolving fund for the Devon's Day celebration. I haven't seen anything more about it. It's not in the warrant. So I thought I would ask.
So,
sorry, go ahead, Robert.
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, so a couple things. One is, what is on the draft warrant as far as the free cash is sort of what we are proposing, meaning on this end. I know that Pauline had brought up about transferring a portion to replenish the 4th of July as well as some funding for the crosswalks technology that was brought up at the public forum. We were going to discuss that with the joint meeting on April 4th with the select board and the finance committee for you to decide when we finalize that.
Excellent. Thank you for the update, Robert.
Okay. And yeah, I guess I'll also point out our next agenda item is to discuss free cash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of a cart before the horse, but
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, so in that spirit, I should point out, like, so on Article 22 on the stabilization fund, these amounts may ultimately change on April 4th, depending on the discussion of the select board and the FinCom. What this article is showing right now is transferring $1,063,073 from free cash to stabilization, of which $313,073 is to stabilization and $750,000 to capital stabilization, which is conceptually consistent with what we've been doing over the last several years as a larger amount towards capital, taking into account capital needs and future capital needs. And as we mentioned in the explanatory note from last year of the stabilization, last year, the explanatory note was pointing out that $400,000 in the stabilization were to forward prepare for the costs from the SAFER grant when the grant expires for the firefighters. This year, it would be $300,000, and next year it would be $200,000. But just to point out, this is the explanatory note. It is not an earmark that has been brought up. All of this funding is going into the stabilization, but we are pointing out that we should be considering the impacts of when that grant expires.
Okay, well, thank you, Robert. Dennis, you have a question?
Yeah, so and I think Robert anticipated my question because I brought this up on the floor at town meeting last year. That is, it's my understanding that town council, or perhaps I think it was town council, maybe the moderator, had made it clear that a town meeting doesn't have the authority to dedicate future funding for other purposes, and that so I guess my point is that it seems to me that the explanatory note kind of gives an impression which isn't fully accurate. And I understand that, obviously this has been an ongoing concern of mine over the last several years, which has not abated. And that it is fine to transfer the money into the stabilization fund. We can talk when time comes to whether or not we need, and again, there's that word need, those 4 additional firefighters. But I think that this gives the impression to the public at large that they have the authority to do this. And I think town council clearly indicated that this town meeting does not have the authority to decide that $300,000 is for the purposes of covering the future costs. I mean, that's my understanding.
Dennis, you are correct in your understanding, and the explanatory note is there more as an understanding of why we're putting $313,000. Given where we are with our stabilization balance compared to, if you look at the financial policies, we're well above where we need to be at a minimum for stabilization, and with potential for an elementary school and a senior center, normally the stabilization split would actually be much more to the capital than just the 750. So it's an explanation of why we're putting the 300,000 in for this year, which is probably a larger split than we normally would do going into the regular stabilization. As for using that for the firefighters, anything that goes into stabilization requires town meeting approval to use it for that purpose. So it's in the explanatory note, but there's no restrictions on it, which town council did clarify last year. But when it does come time, if we choose to use these stabilization funds to offset the operating budget for those 4 firefighters once the grant is over. It's up to town meeting to decide whether or not they want to use the stabilization funds or simply absorb it within the operating budget, or even, to your point, even if they feel that those firefighters are needed, which then becomes a discussion about the overall operating budget.
Right. So, I mean, and I think you explaining that on the floor or having town council kind of, because again, I think that there may be some substantial number who would kind of look at that and say, well, we approved that funding for them last year, or something to that effect. They would kind of see that explanatory note as being, in some sense, binding, which I understand that it is not now. But
we can speak to that at town meeting. We can put together some talking points. It's a good point, Dennis. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thanks. Robert, back to you.
Yep. So then from time to time, on the next series of articles from the finance manager and the town accountant, we go through, these are transfer articles of unexpended bond proceeds for certain projects. So at some point, town meeting had authorized bonding for certain projects. These projects have been completed and there is an amount remaining. And what these articles do is reprogram that funding to new projects. So for example, Article 23 would transfer some bond proceeds in the amount of $10,348.72. That was originally for the DPW Operations Center. And you can see the warrant article in the town meeting was May of 2016. That project has been completed. We're looking to apply this funding to one of the capital projects from earlier this year, which is the replacement of the DPW gate at the DPW yard. The next one in that same vein, Article 24, is about $85,943 remaining from the Groton Shirley Road low pressure sewer project from 2020, meeting June 15th, 2020, looking to reprogram that towards the capital need this year, which is the Central Ave, Main and Central Ave pumping station valves and piping project. And I will point out that in most of these are DPW projects. The DPW director will be able to speak to these projects, and they actually appeared earlier in the capital article. The next one, Article 25, would transfer the unexpended bond proceeds of $61,201 from the Groton Shirley Road water main loop project, which has been completed, and reprogram this towards the capital need for the new well source approval project. And this project is looking to develop the next well source for the town. And then the last one here, Article 26, is a small amount of money, $1,250 remaining from the stormwater asset management plan. We had to put forth a grant match in 2021. This small amount that is left over would be actually transferred back into capital stabilization. So there wasn't a specific project to apply this small amount to, but where it came from capital stabilization at the town meeting in 2021, we would put that back in. So there's sort of reprogramming or cleanup articles that from time to time come before town meeting. Article 27 is in that similar vein of sort of cleanup. This is the rescind of prior borrow authorization. So you can see in the columns the amount of funds, when it was approved, what warrant article, and the original purpose. And so as the treasurer borrows based on authorization from town meeting, in some cases, the full borrow authorization is not needed. From time to time, we want to rescind that to clean up the debt schedule and the borrow authorizations. So that's what this article would do. Barbara will be prepared at town meeting to answer any questions on this, to speak to the detail with respect to that. And you can see in some cases it's very small amounts. Article 28 and 29 are the community preservation articles. As everyone knows, the CPC chair and the CPC committee is generally at town meeting and will be prepared to answer any questions. And they usually, through the moderator, make a very brief presentation on the past year. Article 28 is sort of their standard appropriation article that comes up each year. And then Article 29 is the Peroni Park Playground project, where they look to put $750,000 towards the completion of the playground project. They will be prepared, as will the Parks Commission at town meeting, to answer any questions and probably through the moderator have a brief presentation. I also want to point out that they did have a public hearing on March 22nd, the CPC, regarding this request as well.
All right, thank you. We do have a question, Dennis.
Yeah, just on that point, Robert, and I suspect it might come up. I'm not sure, but that some just distinguishing between the playground project and that authorization, as opposed to obviously the senior center and the coming potential authorizations there. They don't have anything to do with each other, and I fully understand that. But I think that a question may come up about that. Just kind of, you know, people may say, well, what about the senior center? Or I thought there wasn't going to be an article about that there. I think that that's a distinction that some people may ask for. Does that?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, the article does, you know, as Peroni Park Playground project, and not to speak for the moderator, but the discussion is generally supposed to be within the scope of the article. So yeah. I anticipate if somebody does ask about a potential senior center project or so forth, the moderator would steer them back to the article and also point out that this has nothing to do with that project or funding.
Okay. No, I mean, I may give them the heads up on that, but okay. All right.
Sure. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Robert.
And then lastly, there's one last article that's not financial in nature, Article 30, which Carly and Chuck, the facilities director, have been working on with town council. And this is the authorization to initiate, I got to change initiative, to initiate a municipal aggregation program for the town. And so what this is, the first step in the process is it requires town meeting authorization for the town to pursue developing a municipal aggregation program for residents in town. And so conceptually, it provides an opportunity for residents to opt out, not opt in, but to purchase electricity through aggregation at an anticipated savings. And we've heard from a lot of residents since last November, when the big rate hike went in through National Grid and so forth, about the town offering this. We'll have a brief presentation at town meeting, and town council will speak to it. There'll also be more discussion on this, but in order to move forward, the first step is town meeting has to authorize the town to pursue a municipal aggregation program.
And Robert, if I could just jump in on that. So essentially, for the town to be able to get a more attractive rate for the electricity, all homes are grouped together, so the purchasing power is bigger, but you can opt out at any time. And then if you wanted to opt back in, presumably because we're looking for better rates, you can. So you can kind of go in and out at your leisure. Like, just because you opt out doesn't mean you're prohibited from going back in the future. I just wanted to make that clear.
No, I appreciate that. And to the chair, also, we'll make it crystal clear that this is just the first step. So the approval of this article doesn't mean snap, it's going to happen tomorrow. There'll be more public outreach with some specific deadlines and so forth. So we just want to manage folks' expectations that if this passes, it's not like it's instantly into effect. There's a whole process, including public information and public outreach and specific dates. But we want to get the process started as soon as possible. And it does require town meeting to authorize that process. As I point on the bottom, the deadline is actually Friday at noon. We're not aware of any citizens' petitions at this time to the town clerk by noon on Friday. And we're not aware of any other warrant articles at this time, with the exception, as I mentioned earlier, on the 4th, when the board and the FinCom discusses in detail the use of free cash. If there are some other options for free cash, then there would be the appropriate article for that. So I thank the chair for the time to sort of give an overview of where we're at.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. Any other questions on Dennis? You have a question? You're on mute, Dennis.
There you go. Yeah, and I was at the second well, actually I was at them both this year. But in terms of the, and again, Robert and I have talked about this, and I think I raised it last year as well. On the floor at town meeting, I think it would be helpful for the citizens if, when you present the pie charts regarding, various sectors of the budget and how much they consume, that the pie chart for public safety be broken out into its constituent parts. That is police, fire, and the ambulance enterprise fund. And I know that we're all aware that enterprise funds cannot be kind of considered or used for the purposes of public safety. And I think it would be helpful, because clearly these are large segments of the budget. They have fundamentally different functions and purposes. And I think that I, for one, would certainly be better informed regarding spending priorities if, those three separate categories were broken out, so we know what's being spent on fire, what's being spent on police, what's being spent on ambulance. And what I recently learned, and also the regionalized dispatch center, which I was unaware. Well, I guess I should have been aware of it, and I don't know that necessarily you'll be able to do this year. But it just seems to me that I think the public would have a clearer understanding of of where their money is going if those things were broken out.
Okay, we'll take that under advisement. It should be easily attainable, correct, Robert? Or... Yes,
I've discussed with Dennis previously, further drilling down that particular pie chart he's speaking to. So I believe we can do that. I think one thing I just real quick, Mr. Chair, ask one question is, where does DPW fall? And I'm not being cute when I say this, meaning many, we've included DPW under public safety. Many of them say they're the silent arm of public safety, or sometimes we've had them out as their own, piece. And we don't necessarily have to answer it, putting everybody on the spot. I understand where Dennis is coming from, and I think we can clarify that, but just a quick question. All right. As you know, over the years, we've done it sort of both ways.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Pauline, you have a question?
I do. And again, this might be putting the cart before the horse, so I apologize. On the two debt exclusion articles, at the budget hearing on the 24th, I asked, and Ms. Tierney was quick on the answer, so I was very impressed and pleased, what the annual impact would be on the tax rate. We had this information when we did the school building project and the school fields project, but it's not in this version of the warrant. Now, I will concede this is dated the 23rd, the day before the budget hearing. So will Article 11 and Article 12 be updated with the actual annual impact for those two debt exclusion articles?
Through the chair.
Yes, please.
Yes, Pauline. Both explanatory notes will be updated to have that information and the estimated cost impact. And both presentations at town meeting on both of the articles will also have that information.
Excellent. Thank you. Fire Chief told me the other day that he had his already. I haven't spoken to Dan about his version of it, but it's nice to know that it'll be in the warrant for everybody to see. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Barbara just met with the assessor and we'll get that populated in there.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both. Dennis?
Yeah, just on Robert's point about the DPW, just one man's vote, but I would not put DPW in public safety as generally understood. But
Dennis, I'm through the chair. I'm leaning towards breaking it out as its own. I just brought that up because in the past, as the chair knows, Scott, through the many years, we've sometimes done it both ways, but we're looking to give it its own slice.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Dennis. All right. Anything else on the warrant before we move on to item 5? All right. So item 5, and I do want to preface, I have a hard stop at 3 o'clock. I have another meeting. So for item 5 is purpose uses of free cash, which we did discuss. I think, so the final decisions will be made on the 4th. Robert, I would request if there's any objections among the committee, please or the board, please speak up. I actually kind of like the idea of using 10,000 of the free cash to replenish the 4th of July. I think that's something that is, it's small, but it's good. It's very symbolic.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
Yeah, so we don't disagree. So what I would propose is for the meeting on the 4th, before the review and approval of the warrant, we're going to put an item for the FinCom Select Board for discussion on the free cash. And I'm glad that you brought this up and we'll have some information in the packet. So the first is at the last budget hearing, as Pauline brought it up and she mentioned it today, it was brought up about using the appropriate amount of free cash to replenish the 4th of July based on the amount that was used for the Devon's fireworks. So we will have that in the packet and the draft, article. And just for everybody's benefit, it's a standard article that we can put in. The other one that came up was the issue of the crosswalk technology, and I'll get the acronym wrong. The DPW director, we'll have some information on that for discussion, but it was brought up. They cost about $10,000 a unit. The idea of doing some of them, I know it was brought up to even 10 of them. So that was a second item on the free cash. The other thing that we brought up, and I'll put this in the memo, back to Barbara's proposal on paying down the ban, as Barbara and I have presented to the buy board. That was a new idea that does have savings and merit, but I know people wanted to discuss that. If people didn't want to use the free cash for that purpose, there's not the end of the world. And then there's also the discussion as to how much to put into capital and how much into regular stabilization. So we're going to propose to have all of that discussion with the materials right before the approval of the warrant, so those items can be ironed out.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Robert.
In one other area, as you know, Mr. Chair, the forward funding of the pension at $300,000 has worked well from our vantage point. It requires that we do it 2 consecutive years. So we're back to, this would be year 1, do it next year at the savings. I mean, that's another area, in full disclosure, as I have said before, if the select board of FinCom don't want to pursue that, I mean, that $300,000 could go into stabilization as well. So there's some menu options.
All right, excellent, thank you. All right, moving on to item number 6 is discussion around the budget presentation for town meeting. Do you want to do a high level? You want to wait till after the 4th and discuss that at our next meeting?
I think, Mr. Chair, high level, and we're obviously going to need another meeting. I just wanted to get the ball rolling that on Article 3, after it's moved and seconded, historically, and it depends, on the moderator, we've always aimed to have a brief presentation for town meeting on the overall FY24 budget. We've generally have done that as a consensus approach, with the FinCom playing a role someone from the select board, myself, the finance manager. So I think we need to, for today, I wanted to just get it on the agenda, and we need to sort of figure out, A, what do we want to put in the presentation or need to put in the presentation, and two, who wants to do what?
Okay. I always think simple is best, short and simple as much as possible. The ones we've done in the last couple of years, really just highlighting the large movements within the budget, whether it's the increases and the decreases, tend to work really well. Breakout of where the money's going. And then if we want to do a couple of slides on capital, I can speak to capital when that comes up.
Yes, and I know it's been brought up at some of the FinCom meetings, and not to speak, and I know Kurt's here, maybe at that point too, the FinCom could speak to the budget, and I know they've been reconstituted this last year and moving forward, sort of some of the things that they're looking at and will be looking at. So we definitely need another meeting, and I know we're coming up on the end of the hour, but I just wanted to, we need to just figure out the plan for that.
Okay. Anything else on the presentation for this afternoon? No? Okay, thank you, everyone. Right. Item 7, discussion plan for the budget book.
Same, high level. Wanted to get this on here. I know that Miss Antonellis and Barbara will be doing the lion's share of getting this together. Maybe for the next meeting that we establish, Mr. Chair, we could have at least an outline, again, as to what we want to put in there, any other updates and so forth.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions or comments on budget book? No. All right. Next item is scheduling our next meeting. So I think our important timeline is that the FinCom and Select Board will meet a week from today on the 4th. So we need something after the 4th. And then when do we go to print?
So the warrant will be approved on the 4th, and the warrant will go to print. It'll be posted on the 7th and go to print on the 7th.
Okay.
So I was going to propose our next meeting of the buy board be on the 11th at 2 if people were available. And the two major focus points on the 11th would be 1, the budget presentation for town meeting, and 2, the budget book.
That works for me. Kurt, does that work for you? Okay.
Would we be sticking with the 2 o'clock?
Yeah, we got a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 o'clock works for me. If there any All right, so 11th at 2 o'clock it is.
That's fine. I didn't realize I was on mute.
No, it's okay. Appreciate the thumbs up.
I was checking computer calendar and paper calendar and an iPhone calendar.
Should find a way to merge those. All right. So that's our entire agenda for today. I'll open up just for any questions or comments before we adjourn for the afternoon. All right. Being none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 2:54.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Roll call the vote. Ms. Tierney?
Aye.
Mr. Fruskowski?
Aye.
Ms. Antonellis?
Aye.
Mr. Pompriant?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. We're adjourned. Thanks very much. Good meeting today. Good questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Good afternoon.